Hello, everyone. Welcome to the new event here at Peace Islands Institute, New York. We're live with three distinguished speakers. The topic today is Abrahamic perspectives on civil rights. It's a very timely topic, as you would all know, with what's happening here in the United States and, of course, around the world. Our speakers today are Imam Bajwa. He's the Director of Muslim Life in the Chaplain's office at Yale University. Rabbi Ira Ebbin, who's the Rabbi at Congregation Ohav Shalom in Merrick, Long Island, and Pastor Guilford Monrose, who's the President of the God Squad in Brooklyn, in New York. Welcome to you all. Thank you for accepting our invitation today. We're going to be starting in alphabetical order, and we'll be starting with Imam Bajwa. Each speaker will be given 15 minutes to speak, to present from their faith tradition regarding civil rights. And after the three speakers, we'll have about 15 minutes for question and answers. Of course, all of our participants that are watching from around the world, you have the right to write to the right of the YouTube screen there. Please keep your questions succinct. You're welcome to provide your name, any organization you're affiliated with, and we'll also be providing various links to our social media networks. So please, of course, if you're new to Peace Islands, please follow us on our various sites as well. Imam Bajwa, the floor is yours. Thank you again, everyone.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and good evening to our guest, to my esteemed colleagues, and to the listeners for joining us tonight. Thank you so much, Rabbi, and to the Peace Islands Institute for inviting us into this very timely, as you said, and really essential conversation. We live in this historical moment of what's, I think I might call disruption. And there are good types of disruption, and there's sort of chaotic and negative types of disruption. But we hope, and I'm very excited and looking forward to my colleagues' comments. But perhaps from the tumult and the chaos that we're seeing right now, at least in this country, but also I'll allude to this briefly, what we're seeing around the world is that we hope and pray that some good can come out of this. And I am very excited to turn over to them very shortly. I want to make three basic points for today. I'll start theologically. I'll talk about three verses from the Quran that help frame my comments. Number two is I want to talk about historically in the United States. I'm an American Muslim. I've raised here my entire life, of South Asian heritage. And then third, I want to talk about in this contemporary moment. Right. So first, the three ayahs, verses of the Quran that I want to quote, and I'll give the references if the audience wants to follow along. And these are well known. They're very famous ayahs. They're oftentimes referenced in a lot of different conversations, particularly when it comes to the idea of civil rights and human rights. But the first one is from Surah 49, chapter 49, verse 13. This is oftentimes recited in a beautiful way, I think in a very meaningful and cogent way in a lot of interfaith dialogue and intercultural conversations. And it is in translation as, "O people," this is God speaking to humanity. "O humanity, O people, we created you from a single man and a single woman and made you into races and tribes so that you should recognize one another. In God's eyes, the most honored of you are the ones most mindful of him. God is all knowing, all aware. Excuse me. The second ayah or verse that I want to quote is from the third chapter of the Quran and verse 104. And it says in translation, "Be a community that calls for what is good, urges what is right, and forbids what is wrong. Those who do this are the successful ones." And finally, what is perhaps most germane to our conversation today is in the fourth chapter, verse 135. And it says in translation, "O you who believe, uphold justice and bear witness to God, even if it is against yourselves, your parents, or your close relatives. Whether the person is rich or poor, God can take best care of both of you. Refrain from following your own desire so that you act justly. If you distort or neglect justice, God is fully aware of what you do." And so the first point that I really want to put out on the table for our reflection is that the Quran speaks in many different ways about many different topics, notably about the idea of the inherent created and God-given dignity, inherent dignity of what's called Bani Adam, of the children of Adam alayhi salam, right? We have a common ancestor, a common mother and father, as we would say, and we are all the beautiful and blessed progeny of our grandparents, as we would say. And the Quran uses this when it talks about humanity, about drawing our attention back to the fact of our common origin. And ultimately, we're all the creation of the great creator of the heavens and universe. And so the reason I wanted to frame it with that is that when we talk about the idea of civil rights, which is a contemporary sort of notion. However, I want to put that in conversation with the idea that the Quranic paradigm is one that human beings have been given and endowed an inherent dignity that is inviolable, that it is actually evil, and it transgresses against the majesty and the guidance of God to strip people's inherent dignity and the rights that they have been given. And this transcends race, transcends gender, transcends culture, transcends all their identity markers. That's the point, is that this is our common humanity, right? That we come from a common human family. This is pretty self-evident, but I just want to say it from the Quranic perspective. I've shared three sort of verses that show different nuances, and I'll just run through them one more time, and I'll go to my second point. The idea there that I want to say is that God is telling us, the listener or the reader, that we have been created by design into beautiful and diverse nations and tribes, races and peoples, in the language of the Quran, so that we might know one another. That inherent in the human project, inherent in the human condition, is for us to learn about each other in our beautiful diversity across race, nationality, culture, etc., etc., and that the most honored of people in the eyes of God are those who are most mindful of him. And so, for some of us, this is like common sense. But we live in a time, I'm sad to say, in which what we take for common sense, we take for granted. That there are forces, and I think it's worth naming, there are forces that are literally dehumanizing other human beings, other peoples, because of race, because of class, because of gender, because of nationality, because of ethnicity. And so, I'm stating the obvious, but I just want so that we're all sort of there's a common thread of understanding what the Quranic paradigm is. The second point is God is calling, that saying that let there be a community that rises up from amongst you, that urges what is good, that and forbids what is wrong. Is that we have essential moral, ethical guidelines of understanding right and wrong as we operate in the world, right? And that is the path to felicity. And the final point, final verse, and then I'll go on to my next point, is God is saying, "Oh, you who believe," to addressing the Muslim readers of the Quran in this specific verse, as an imperative: uphold justice and bear witness to God. And then what I love is the second part that qualifies that, even if it is against yourselves, your parents, and your close relatives. And the reading there is that we as human beings have human fallibility and human frailty, is that we may talk a big game about the great, transcendent ideals of justice and what it means to fight for justice. But the human ego and human desires are the weaker part of our nature. And there are moments when we can fall prey to that. And if it's my people, my family, my in group versus the out group, is that perhaps I may deviate from that standard of justice and tip the scales in a balance in a different way, and rule unjustly in favor of my people against other people. And Allah is warning us in this verse that don't do that, whether the person is rich or poor, because we know, right, that there are systems of justice that have inherent sort of corruption, that they favor the rich and the privileged, to use that language, and they disfavor and disenfranchise, right, those who are poor and those who are marginalized, because God can take care of all, right? And then the final point there is that if you distort and neglect justice, God is omniscient. God is cognizant of everything that's going on. And this is a reminder to the listener. That was the first point. I just wanted to sort of frame this. This is an essential Quranic Islamic paradigm when we talk about the idea of civil rights or justice within civil rights. The second 2 points I want to talk about are, and I'm mindful of the time, is that, historically, I want to give due absolute credit to, to the history of the Black Muslim struggle. That has not only, many people are familiar with the work of Malcolm X, the legacy of Malcolm X, who was a contemporary of the great Dr. King, and the challenges and struggles that they shared, and they had different perspectives, and it's noteworthy to talk about those as American Muslims. There's a great book that came out last year called The Sword and the Shield about the life and legacy of Dr. King and Malcolm X, and they had differing perspectives on how to best fight for civil rights and achieve the liberation of their respective communities. That we're familiar with that, but I want to point out, as someone who is of immigrant heritage, right, is that there is a long-standing presence of African American, Black American Muslims that goes back 300-400 years, that were brought over in the earliest parts of the transatlantic slave trade, that numbered in the millions of people, that over time, that there was an eraser, there was a forgetting of their legacy, but that legacy is there. I want to do justice as someone who identifies with immigrant heritage to my indigenous Muslim brothers and sisters that are parts of my community and many other communities, right? That we come from very hybrid community. That has to be noted. And the last point that I want to wrap up with is that in this historical moment, right, we're having this very timely, very challenging, but extremely necessary conversation. Most recently, as I'm sure you're all well aware, in the aftermath of the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, two of the most recent victims of this, but that goes back. The Black Lives Matter predates that. And for that matter, I'm sure I'm speaking to colleagues who can speak to this much better than I do. It's not that Black lives didn't matter before. It's that there is a consciousness, a political and social consciousness that emerged in the aftermath of Trayvon and Tamir Rice and so many countless others, right? That now we have a language in this moment to talk about that, but that is, we have a history, right? One might call the original sin of America, of the brutalization of Black bodies, of men and women, right? That goes from slavery up until now. I mean, this is what I, as an American, have studied, have listened to, have been in conversation with, and also exist in an institution of educational higher learning that we are regularly talking about, right? That we need to be honest about where we're at. But what I want to end with in my final point is that of the many things that can be spoken about that have come out in the last many months, also in the face of a global pandemic that is disproportionately affecting, right, minority communities in many ways, disenfranchised and marginalized communities, and not just in the global South, but also in the United States as well. How many people are from what communities are working as essential workers and that are on the front lines? I mean, these are points that I think just we need to acknowledge. But what I want to say, excuse me, as I wrap up, is that where is the Muslim voice in this? And as someone who is not in any way pretending to be a monolithic voice of my diverse Muslim community in America, but someone who is in conversation with the leadership of the millions of different Muslims in America, is that I think there's consensus, right, that Muslims need to be and are part of the conversation in the forefront in an intra-faith and an interfaith conversation about this is a moment when people of faith and people of conscience need to stand up about dismantling oppressive systems and being participants, willing participants, conscious participants in the long, arduous, diligent struggle, right, to redress wrongs, to redress historical wrongs that have been perpetuated, right, by systems. And so what that looks like, these are macro level problems. I am one individual. I in no way make any claims to be a transformative change agent, but is that what can we do to call people of faith and conscience, of common cause, right, from within my community and outside of my community that I want to be in dialogue with as a Muslim American, is how do we fight for civil rights? How do we fight for civil rights for different religious communities, for different ethnic and racial communities, and all their multiplicities? And so I just want to put that out there, that, as Muslims, we are called in this moment. And I just want to give one last thing, and I want to end before time, to give time to my colleagues, is that I want to highlight, if anyone on the call is looking for, there are many great organizations from so many different communities that are working, but one that I want to highlight is the work of, it's called Muslim ARC, Muslim ARC, and it stands for Muslim Anti-Racism Coalition. It's an extraordinary group of really brilliant and accomplished, and I think just deeply caring Muslim activists. Many of them happen to be Black American Muslim activists, and for that matter, female Black American Muslim activists that are on the front lines, that are studying, learning, teaching, educating, and out there mobilizing our community, what it means to be in conversation, right, with people of different race, different class, different gender, different people of different religious identities, on how we can work on a common cause. So thank you very much to the organizers and for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, Imam Bajwa. Very succinctly done, all within time, without even a reminder. Thank you very much. We're now turning to Rabbi Ebbin. Please, sir, the floor is yours. Thank you again. Rabbi, if you're ready, if I can ask you to unmute.
Unmute yourself.
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yes, I'm
Rabbi.
sorry. I'm having a little bit of technical difficulties, but I think we should be okay. We're good now?
Yes, the floor is
Okay,
yours.
wonderful. I think I was wondering if I was getting censored. I want to thank you so much, and I want to thank the Imam and the pastor for joining us today. Thank everyone for inviting me to participate in this program at a time, as we mentioned, it seems the world seems so fragmented and partisan. There's something particularly special and even holy about the three Abrahamic faiths getting together to speak on a topic that promotes unity, brotherhood, and mutual respect. And I truly believe this is something that's extremely holy. And I hope that all of you who are participating can, not just the speakers, but everyone who's this evening can appreciate that as well. I was asked to speak about the Jewish perspective on the topic, which is a good thing because it happens to be that I'm Jewish. I know a little bit something about it. And I wanted to begin with a story. I was teaching over a Zoom class not too long ago, a few months ago, that the Bible and our Torah introduced the idea to the world, this fundamental principle of the creation story. The principle that was mentioned before, that every human being was created, what we refer to as B'Tselem Elokim, in the image of God. Our Talmud and our rabbinic teaching goes far as to say that we learn from the creation story that the first human being was created alone for two reasons, to promote two ideas. The first was that he who destroys one person destroys an entire world. And the second is that no one person can say to another that my father was more important than yours, as we all descend from the same person and also have, as the Imam mentioned, God as our parent. Thus, this I explain is the underlying principle which shaped the values of our founding fathers in this country when they exclaimed that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And even more so, I shared in the class that during this pandemic, the entire globe shut down in an effort to save the lives and minimize human loss. And that economies were put on hold, life cycle events were canceled, and the world stopped because every single government in the free world subscribed to this fundamental biblical principle that every human being has inherent value. It's a philosophy that I dare say very long ago didn't apply. And I marveled at the progress that the world had taken and how this at least can be one silver lining in this particularly dark time. So I was giving this class, and then, as it always is, and my colleagues will agree, there's always that one question, or somebody challenged me and asked the following question. They said, how can it be that Judaism, which introduced this idea and the value and equality of each and every human being, how is it okay for the Torah to permit for the ownership of slaves? How is it okay, or how does this jive to permit the idea of genocide? To state that a woman is acquired and thus the property of her husband? How can it be that Judaism, the Torah, subscribes and believes in capital punishment? How would these jive with the principles of equality and civil rights? So I said, those are good questions. And what I wanted to share this evening at the panel, I want to share the answer that I shared with him. See, I believe the answer starts with an understanding of the context that these words were given thousands of years ago. Abraham was the paradigm of the word an iconoclast. An iconoclast is a person who challenges established norms and institutions. In a world that was filled with corruption, survival of the fittest, and might makes right, a world that was enveloped in pagan practices which necessitated pacifying and placating the gods with human sacrifices, here was Abraham, who introduced a monotheistic understanding of God, and just as importantly, lived a life filled with hospitality, kindness, generosity, and selflessness. And yet, Abraham owned slaves. Now, are you to tell me that Abraham is a racist and does not believe in the basic principles of humanity that he is legendarily known for? Should we no longer teach the stories of Abraham because based on this, he was a hypocrite? Should we cancel him in the world of cancel culture and erase him from our curriculum? Of course not. Because Abraham lived in a time when slavery was prevalent. And similarly, the Torah was written during this era. And if we keep that in mind, we can come to appreciate the contribution that the Bible, our Torah, has made in this world. See, the Torah was written at a time when slavery was an undeniable fact of life. If 3,000 years ago the Torah were to state that slavery is unethical or immoral and should be eradicated, it would have been viewed as ludicrous and absurd. I mean, the entire economy was based on slavery. The raising of children, the running of a household with all of its daily chores, all the necessities to a great extent, the services of the service of servants and slaves, all were required just for day-to-day life. This is how civilization functioned then. So the Torah does not eradicate slavery, but rather it introduces the most novel idea about slaves. It says that slaves had rights. It says that they have to be provided for, that you must treat them with respect and with humanity. If you injured your slave, according to the Jewish law, they went out free. If your slave ran away, according to the Bible, others were not allowed to run after him or her. Your slave needed to be treated with dignity. Our sages teach us that if you only had one blanket in your home, then you were required to give it to your slave rather than to keep it to yourself. And the Talmud goes as far as to say that one who acquires a slave acquires a master. In the age of slavery, Judaism introduces basic human and civil rights. And it goes even further. In an age of predetermined class system, which meant that if you were born a slave or a nobleman, that is where you remain for the rest of your life. In this age, the story of Joseph introduces to the world that one can go from being a prisoner of the state to a nobleman of the country. In an age of hierarchy of birth, the stories of Genesis introduce the birth order does not divinely dictate one's role in the world. In an age of tribalism, where other nations were demonized and dehumanized, the Torah taught to love the stranger, to love the foreigner, and to love the other. Kiger ayitem be'eretz Mitzrayim, as it says, because we were foreigners in the land of Egypt. We are not only told to sympathize with these foreigners, we're told to empathize with them, to feel the experience of their hardships. We're told not to hate even our oppressors, including the Egyptians themselves who oppressed and tortured us, because our mission of bringing blessing to the world could never survive with a culture that was based on hate. In an age where women were treated as little more than property, where a woman could be discarded and left destitute without so much of a blink of an eye from her husband or master, we are told that Adam treats his wife Eve with the reverence when he refers to her as Im Kol Adam, the mother of all mankind. We're taught through the story of Deborah in the book of Judges that women can hold positions of leadership and even command an army. And we are instructed that with a marriage, a woman receives a ketubah, which states the responsibilities a husband has to her. And they include the provisions of food, of clothing, and of conjugal relations if she demands it, and not if he does. The ketubah includes that she received financial compensation if the marriage is severed, whether by divorce, if she was predeceased by her husband. And rabbinic law states clearly the responsibility of man that has towards his wife. So little of this existed at the time. The Torah, our Bible, could be referred to as the most progressive book written up to that time. And this is my key point, it laid the foundation and paved the way to bring these ideas into the modern world. It introduced these concepts of civil rights, of equality of all people, of respect of the other, and of women's rights that would evolve as social norms over the centuries. Today, we live in a modern society with values and morals of equality and civil rights, regardless of race or creed. And that is only possible because we stand on the shoulders of the Jewish Torah that introduced these ideals to the world. We still have a long way to go, but the progress that we've seen over these last centuries, in particular over this century, and hope the progress that we'll see even more so, I believe, is based on the foundation that was paved by the Torah 3,000 years ago in the Jewish faith. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rabbi Ebbin. Thank you very much. We now move to Pastor Monrose. Pastor, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and to all of you who shared before me, what great joy it is to just hear and learn from great traditions, the Abrahamic faiths in which we represent tonight. You know, Jesus, Yeshua, who lived in Nazareth, went to a synagogue on one Sabbath day, and he stood up for to read according to the Bible, and he pulled from the book of Isaiah the prophet, and he read from what I think is the premise of the civil rights era, in which Dr. King and the need for the Black church arise out of, seeing that there were people who were disenfranchised, but people who were taken advantage of simply because of the color of the skin, nothing else. Just because we were a blacker hue than others in America. And so the Black church raised up from, I think, what was said so many thousands of years ago, when Jesus stood up for to read, and he said something that is striking, and I want to just quote it from the book of Luke in the New Testament. Chapter 4, he says that the Spirit of the Lord is upon me. Therefore, he has anointed me to announce the good news to the poor. He sent me to proclaim freedom to the imprisoned and renew the sight of the blind, to release those who have been crushed, and to proclaim the year of the favor of Adonai, O God. So in that premise, the civil rights era for us began, knowing full well that sometimes when you had the white slave master giving us the same Bible to oppress us, and you had what we call the white man's religion, and there was a fight between people who were progressive, and then there were also those who were racist and still using Christianity as a cloud for their malicious sins, and kept the people in bondage, giving us mortgages that we could not afford, putting us in ghettos that we should not have been in, being able to block us from fountains to drink. And they were using the same Bible, quite interesting, that they were using the same Bible. And Dr. King rose up, and because of the Black church, actually, the civil rights era was named the civil rights era. I mean, when you look at the decades long of the work of the faith community, leading the righteous charge. And so there were Muslims and Jews standing next to Dr. King and in those eras. But we don't just stop at Dr. King. The same cry is today. Because I want to say that even Malcolm X, when he talked about the fact of, if you look at the clip from in that era and you play that same clip today, you would be mesmerized to see the same place that we are as a Black people. So the Bible gives us, and the Black church, there's a necessity for the Black church. Not that we are concerned that there is a white church or a Black church, but just as the Imam said earlier today, Black lives have always mattered. But what we saw before our eyes during the summer of George Floyd is that we saw for the first time a country and a nation that was shell-shocked because of the coronavirus, had no opportunity to be so self-absorbed with the mundane things of life that we were all brought to a point of being standstilled. And we see for the first time, literally, a Black life that was snuffed from the life of an innocent person on the ground by a police officer. The world was shocked, but the only difference is that you saw it live. We have been saying this for years and years and years and years, from slavery to Jim Crow, to the new Jim Crow, to segregation, to racism, structural racism, institutional racism. When you look at the pipeline between schools, failing schools, and mass incarceration, when you look at laws that were passed by Christians in Congress because of the blackness of our skins, you know for sure that in a religion, especially in terms of Christianity, at least the Bible that I know, at least the Jesus that I is going to be speaking about, at least the prophet that I believe, was not a blue eye and a blonde hair person. That person who was from the Africa region or the Middle East. I know for sure that his message resounded to those who were disenfranchised, those who had no voice. And I think that for us right now is that if we're going to come to the table with our religion, I think that we have to correct it and come right. That all of the quotation that was read in the Quran, and then you also had in the Torah, in the Talmud, all of the holy scriptures that we're reading talks about justice from a standpoint of mercy. And when you listen to even the presidential candidates today, we don't use the word poor a lot anymore. For some reason, we dance around the word poor, but Jesus, Yeshua, and even in the Quran and in the Torah, it talks about over and over again, poor people, the poor. And the idea is when you have a country like America, who says a lot of good things, but at the same time, our politics and the policies that we put in place affects adversely black and brown individuals or poor people as well. You had 9/11, and you had the atrocities of the Muslim community, who was again marginalized because of the color of their skin or what they wear. You had the Jewish Holocaust of hatred. So civil rights era, or the civil rights for us, is steeped in what we have in terms of our prophetic tradition, and we must be the prophetic voice. And so this is causing us now to go into politics, which we didn't want to go into, because politics is, you have leaders who are making policy, and because policymakers make policy for people, and policy affects people, and we are called to people, we must be engaged in the national discourse of what we're seeing. And I think that, we have mentioned today on the Zoom that when you find in America today that opposites and everyone is drawing a line, everyone is going back to what I think is worse than the civil rights era. People are being othered by others as well. So I think that in our tradition, when you look at the Word of God, when you look at the Bible, and you open those pages, not only in the book of Luke, but throughout the Bible, it's sense that we have to make sure that we deal with the poor, that we deal with the failing schools in our city. We just was on a call today with faith leaders, mostly black faith leaders across the country, who had the very same story of the fact that we have just a high level of violence in the communities, and those communities are carbon copy of each other. We're talking about failing schools. We're talking about high coronavirus deaths. We're talking about low response for the U.S. Census. We're talking about infrastructure that has been pulled out and ripped up from our communities. We're talking about high levels of sicknesses, all type of diseases, healthcare that is not the best quality. So the word of God, and as faith leaders in our tradition, must speak to those that are disenfranchised and the poor that's among us. We have to do a better job in America, especially on the hypocrisy of saying that America was founded on Christian values. And then to see the policies that come from the White House or the local city hall in those states that over and over again have defunded peace, has divested in our communities, and left our communities basically to kill one another. And so when we're talking about civil rights era, I don't think that we have the luxury of staying in the 1960s and the 1970s and the 1950s anymore. We are right here, right now, in this moment. Rabbi said that the Torah was one of the best written books in that time, most advanced. And I think that the Holy Scriptures still remains the best word and guide for us today. It gives us a moral framework that if we follow it without our biases, I think that this world will be a better place. So I'm sad to say that we are still here talking about rights for blacks in America, talking about rights for Muslim in America, talking about rights for Jews in America. I am hoping that the civil rights era of what we knew then, and even what we're speaking about now, that we follow the words that are written in our holy scriptures. And for me as a Christian, and for me as a black Christian, unapologetic black, I think that it is very important for us to move forward as a community and as a society by going back to the Holy Scriptures and learning what the Word of God says. So I am hoping that after tonight that things are going to change in America. We are bracing for a very difficult election coming up. I'm praying over America that we will find peace, but that also that we have justice. And I want to say one last thing. You know, we have been saying over and over again and about law and justice. I hear something so different when I hear law and justice. What America needs to exact upon, especially the poor among us and the disenfranchised, is actually grace and mercy. And it goes, we have had a lot of law and justice. I mean, you know, Rosa Parks could not sit in the front of the bus because of law and order, because the law was that you could not go up there. There was given us no grace. Just by grace, she sat down in the front of the bus. Going and eating encounters with blacks and white. That was law and order. You could not do that. You could not look at a white individual if you were black walking down. People got killed for that. And so I think that what we need to start to do is change our language to reflect that of the Holy Scriptures. And so not only do we need law and order, but I think what we need more so in America, really and truly, from the depths of my heart, is grace and mercy. That's why Dr. King said that he will not be satisfied. And he will never be satisfied until he sees justice flow like a mighty stream. And I'm longing to see that day while I'm alive. God bless everybody.
Thank you, Pastor Monrose. Thank you very much. I'll take privilege of moderator and ask the first question, if I may. And that is what, in regards to the issues you brought up, both the spiritual, theological, and social justice aspects. What are your communities doing in regards to countering this? Are there practical things you can mention that would motivate others, whether they be faith-based organizations or communities or even non-faith-based? And part B to that question is, what should we, as people of faith, with different faith backgrounds, what is being done? Are groups coming together with different faith backgrounds? And on what could be done? What should be done? Are more people around the table of diverse faith and cultural backgrounds are going to make this easier? Can we be motivated to be working with our fellow citizens of all these diverse faith backgrounds? Who'd like to start there, if I may? Shall I point? Imam Bajwa, would you like to?
Sure. Thank you so much to the phenomenal presentations from my colleagues tonight. Thank you so much. My heart is full from listening to you. I just wanted to say that sincerely. Thank you so much, Rabbi, for the question. I'll take a quick stab at it. You know, what I would say is what we can do intra-faith and interfaith, and I'll give you two examples, right? One is, I mean, there's so many things to choose from, but literally the one that comes to my mind right now, because I live in the city of New Haven, which is an amazing city. It is a city that has challenges, and I live 5 minutes from the local mosque, and it's an inner city working class mosque. And I say that in the sense of like, these are my people. This is where I pray when I'm not praying at Yale. And so I'm not taking any credit for this because I'm just a parishioner there, right? I'm not on the leadership. But the leadership of my local mosque has had a food pantry going from before COVID, but especially during the COVID lockdown. And in the neighborhood, it is open to everyone. Every Wednesday for 2 hours, you know, the team shows up, they set up, and there is a line down the block. And I'm sure you've seen images from across the country, right? Where there's, you know, forget blocks, they go on for miles. People line up in queues for their cars because we're facing a pandemic, like was said before, that is literally the ramifications are hitting not just about people's health, but people's incomes, people's jobs, people, they can't pay their rent, they can't pay their grocery bills. And so that is a very, very, what, you know, we may say a small thing, but it's actually a very large thing, like literally to feed other people, to give them nourishment in a time of great crisis and uncertainty. That is something, you know, we say low-hanging fruit. is that that's something that at least my community is doing, and that we can continue to do to help take care of our brothers and sisters in humanity. And I just want to reiterate, that is in no way, the food pantry run by the mosque is in no way just for the mosque. It's for the neighborhood. It's for everyone that lives in and around that neighborhood and beyond. So that's the internal community. I think external to the community, what we can do interfaith is an event like this, right? So we bring our respective audiences together to listen to the wisdom and beauty from our different traditions. And what was spoken about so excellently, like the idea of compassion and mercy. We're living in a time now of increased divisiveness and drawing more and more lines and more fracturing, right, between race and religion and all of that. Whereas what we can do is, I think, honestly, people want to see positive behavior modeled by their leaders. And if their leaders can say, how do we come together on common cause, right? That anti-Semitic attacks break my heart. Islamophobic attacks break my heart. Anti-Black racist attacks break my heart. And they should, they should be deeply troubling for my community. So how can I reach out to other communities and say, I want what's best for you. I want your safety and your security and well-being, right? And let us come together to promote, right? I mean, the whole idea is that rising tides lift all boats, is I want your community to prosper, just as I would hope you would want my community to prosper, so.
Thank you, Imam. Rabbi, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, no, I think actually you answered your own question. And from my perspective, it really starts with interfaith dialogue. The more exposure that we have to other groups, the closer relationships develop. And then in times of challenge, in times of trouble, and even in times of misunderstanding, because there's a friendship that's already been created and bonded. So then it's a wholly, totally different perspective. It's been a long 8 months, whatever we're up to now, since 7-8 months. But somewhere in December and January, or even before that, the year before, from the shooting in the Pittsburgh synagogue, the shooting in the San Diego synagogue, and the attacks that were taking place both in Rockland County and Brooklyn, the messages that I received from the Muslim community, from the Black community, letters, calls, visits. We had one imam speak from the pulpit right after the Pittsburgh shooting. It meant so much. It meant so much to our community. It meant so much to see the empathy that they were feeling, not just the sympathy, but the empathy. And similarly, during these protests and the challenges that the Black community is facing, the Islamophobia they're facing, when we build these relationships and the interfaith relationships, it basically creates a dialogue that allows doors to open in every way, shape, and form.
And I think that I would like to add to as
please, Pastor Monrose, if you will, please.
Yeah, one of the things that I would add to as well is that as faith leaders, we have to hold our own faith accountable too as well, to make sure that even for us in the African American community in Brooklyn, I've been called to many instances of anti-Semitism. And one of the things that I would always say to my Jewish leaders and friends and mentors is that when I need you, you have to come to my community as well. So I would say that to answer the last piece of the question, what could we do further to continue to work together, is that we have to show up for one another when we need each other, and that's paramount of importance. I just can't have me come to you and that you come to me. You have to stand for my issues as I'm standing for your issues.
Thank you very much. Critical words, of course. Now, I'm just going to remind our audience, if you're tuning in either live, if you're watching this later, please subscribe to our channel, and of course, give us a big thumbs up. All this type of support helps the channel. Of course, it helps get this message out beyond the current people participating and those watching later. So again, subscribe to our channel and give us a thumbs up. There's various links in the chat box to our social media stream, so please join and follow us and all those wonderful things that we like doing on social media. Now we've got a question from one of our members, Richard Cohen asks, how can we make the golden rule more prevalent in the field, not just during prayer? Can I pose this? We'll go in reverse order this time. Can I pose this to you, Pastor Monrose?
Sure. I hope that the same golden rule he's talking about, I'm going to be referring to. But you have to love yourself as your neighbor. One of the things that I would say is that really the test for being a disciple is that it's seen that when men will see that we are his disciples when we love one another. It means that when we love the people that I pass before I get to my temple, I can say hello, I can say hi. We can serve and love people regardless of their religious background or whether they smoke or not. We don't have to impose our particular views and individuals because we're opening up our food pantry to everyone. So I think that how we make it practical and real outside of the four walls of our temple and our church is to make sure that we live what we say the best preached sermon is a sermon that is lived.
I'll expand. I think I'm next, right?
Yes, please.
When I was a kid, the golden rule means he who has the gold makes the rules. So I assume that's not the golden rule that we're referring to. I'm going to go back to that idea of empathy, that the ideals of empathy, which is to really feel what other people are feeling, to feel, to walk a mile in their shoes, not to judge a person until you've been in their position, but also feel the pain of others. That is really where everything starts. Once you recognize that and you put yourself in the position of others, you're naturally, and you live that, then you'll take everything that you found in the synagogue and you'll bring it outside the walls of the synagogue.
Sure.
And Imam, would you like to add?
I mean, there's nothing to add. It's already so excellent.
Brilliant.
Unless you have a particular golden rule that you know.
No, I mean, I want to believe that we're all subscribing to the same one. I mean, I really, again, what can I add to what's already been said? Except just a thought to add to, just to honor the question is, you know, I think to drill down really at a kind of granular level is that, you know, I have to, in my life with my children, I'm blessed, I'm a father, I'm a husband, with my family, I want them, I care about their education, I care about their health, I care about their access to, you know, to a clean living environment. And so for me, it's that I can't just want it for my children or my spouse. I really have to want it for my neighbors. I want them to be prospering in healthy learning environments, in schools, to have access to, you know, healthcare, to have access to meaningful work. And so, I mean, it's a collective struggle, right? And I'm saying this fully cognizant of the fact that I work in an incredibly privileged institution, Yale, right? In a city that is quite a contrast between power and privilege and between deprivation. And so all I'll say is I can only speak from my own experience. I see this day in and day out. Like, you literally cross the street from the halls of power that have access to like government and finance to like people that are homeless and people that are struggling with mental illness across the street, right? Within 10, 20 feet. And so I think the challenge to finish is that, you know, practicing what I preach is that I have to not only want what's good for my family, but I have to show that to my kids and to my community is I want this for you as well, right? And how can I do that in my life? That's where the hard work really takes off, right? And it's coalition building, interfaith, interracial coalition building. How can we work together to help each other? So.
Thank you. We've got a comment and question from Soraya Dean. Yes, to grace and mercy in our world. Pastor Gil, for centuries we prayed to God invoking blessings. We need something more practical on ground, more women in political office influencing policy, ? Did anyone want to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think he called me out, so I think I can respond to it. In terms of grace and mercy, when we talk about grace and mercy, and when we talk about the new political reality, you know, the violence can never bring peace. And sad to say that sometimes, even as you look in the Middle East, we have a great divide right now You know, military might will never bring peace in the heart of mankind. So, yes, we probably would need more women in politics. I wouldn't say no. I think we would need a lot of different progressive candidates. But I think you cannot legislate how you handle and take care of individuals. We have so many laws on the books, but yet still, you know, it's the heart, the condition of mankind that we just simply have a set of individuals who are actually taught to hate people. You have to learn to hate a Muslim. You can't just get up one day and say, well, I hate a Muslim, or I hate the Jew, or you hate me because I'm black. So it's not just, you know, having a good candidate and running for office. I mean, most of our cities that we have, I mean, really and truly that we were talking about today with the violence, they're run by Democrats for a lot of years. And it's not an idea about Republicans or Democrats. I'm just saying that, listen, people are people at the end of the day, whether you're Republican or Democrat. So what I'm asking for is something that is more transformative. I'm asking for people to have compassion on the poor and to be able to love one another. That's what I'm asking for.
Thank you. Did anyone else want to comment? Rabbi or Imam? If not, I'm going to ask another question. Okay, and that question is, where we are, of course, never mix religion and politics, but it makes for interesting viewing, of course. Irrespective, come November 4, there will be a president, either the same or a new president, irrespective of who that person is. What is one bit of advice you would provide, one bit of spiritual counsel regarding civil rights you would want to provide to the president on November 4?
I can take that.
Yes, please.
Okay, yeah. I would like to give that advice right now. I don't want to wait till November the 4th. That seems too long. We got so much things to do between now and the election. And that's how we think in America, right? We go to the next best, like the next election, and then we're waiting for November 4th to make these changes, and we think that the Biden team is going to come in and they're going to make a change. Brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you right now, racial injustices and institutional racism is embedded in structures and laws. It takes centuries. I'm saying centuries. It takes years to unravel. So what my advice would be is that I will look the president directly into his eyes, and I'll say to the president, whoever it is, justice and mercy is required by the Lord. You can make all the money in the world. You can make all the decisions that you want to make, but you have to take care of the poor. If you don't take care of the ones that are disenfranchised among us, America will continue to decline, unfortunately, because God judges on how we deal with the least among us, not how we deal with the rich, the poor, and the mighty. That's what I would say.
Rabbi, Imam, would you like to add to that? I think we've lost the Rabbi.
They're sanctioning us.
Yes, somebody heard and they're blocking the Rabbi.
Right, it's the Russians.
Security Council, but let's not go there.
Can you hear me back now? I'm okay?
Yes, you're back.
Right, so I happen to be standing in front of the pulpit, so I do my best not to speak about politics in general from the pulpit as a policy. I also, and I'll tell you why, because it creates incivility in among the congregants, among the pastors, the parishioners. People are so passionate these days, passionate except it's misplaced. And so somehow we've lost the ability to be able to have conversations and disagree with each other without alienating each other. The quote I saw from Lord Jonathan Sacks is that we're so narrow in our view that we don't broadcast anymore, we narrowcast. We only speak to the people that believe and agree with us. It's a great line. And so if I was speaking to the next president, whoever that might be, I would just talk about recreating civility where people can disagree with each other, disagree with philosophy, but at the same time still have the ability to be friends, to have and remember the principles of brotherhood.
These are great. I feel like this is all pieces of a mosaic that are fitting together. And so I will just add my little piece to it. Thank you. Ditto to what both of my colleagues have said. And the thing that I'll add is this, is that, you asked us on the spot, like the first thought that comes to my mind is this tension between hubris and humility, right? Hubris is a foolish and dangerous overconfidence in your abilities and in your accomplishments. And humility is the opposite, right? One of giving glory to God for whatever accomplishments that you have done, or things that you haven't even done, right? And so from that tension between hubris and humility, which is you find leaders in various institutions go back and forth on this, but to make it very practical is to say, in our tradition, the idea is that God sent untold number of prophets to humanity, right? The Quran says that we sent prophets to every nation, every tribe that ever walked the face of this earth, and we don't know the exact number. The idea is that it's the scores of numbers. And the common thread through all of the message of these prophets, right, the prophetic voices that said, is that every society they went to, they always challenged the status quo. They never said, basically, you're all right. What you're doing is just fine. Because what happens is the status quo is enabling and keeping, those in power, right? Those who are rich, those who are influential, those who have privilege. And so that what I would say to the future president would be that one has to, the ethics of leadership is that one has to disrupt in the best of ways the status quo. Those who are neglected, those who are forgotten, those who have been pushed to the sides and disenfranchised. How do we uplift them, right? And it takes incredibly hard work to change systems, as has already been spoken about. But that's what I would say is I come from a place of humility of how can I enact this change rather than a place of hubris, is that it's all good. We've already got what we need to get. Well, why would we want to change anything?
Okay, thank you very much, Imam. And on that positive and hopeful note, and we've come to the end of our event, I want to thank each and every one of you, Pastor Monrose, Imam Bajwa, Rabbi Ebbin, for setting up time to be with us. This is critical. The struggle continues. It's not only decades old, it's centuries old. We hear on many occasions, never again, but sadly, we are deafened. Sometimes people ask me, why are some of the stories in the Quran repeated? Why are some of the statements repeated so often? People forget. People forget. They forget by the end of the chapter. They forget by the end of the book. They forget by the end of the day. So we're constantly reminded through our holy scriptures. Unfortunately, we are forgetful, and we see that. Many times we've had to say never again after when it was first said, half a century ago. So we pray for those that are of faith. We pray that we can work collectively, both within our homes, our institutions, and between institutions, that we can keep the fight, keep the struggle continuing. Having said that, again, I want to thank you, each and every one of you. I want to thank the audience participants for attending today. Again, like this video, subscribe, get the word out. The more people that hear of this, the more we can be doing together collectively. For those of faith, for those of no faith, this is a shared human experience, a shared problem that we all have a responsibility to our Creator, and really a responsibility to society at large, and really to coming generations will be held accountable. We look forward to hosting you at a future event. Thank you, everyone. Be well and safe during these difficult times. Goodbye for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. God bless you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Goodbye. Okay, I've ended the stream. We're gone. Thank you.
Thank you so much.